Toronto, Asher Chaim, and Sarah, and let's see. Oh, Stephen Rudin's coming in. Let's admit him. Oh, let me open this up here. Let's put that on gallery. Let's see if that works. View. Gallery is where we can see more people. Good morning, Richard. Good to see you. Stephen Rudin,
Good
how
morning.
nice to see you.
Yeah,
How
good
nice to
morning,
find,
Diane.
how
Good
nice
to
to
see
find
as
you
well.
back.
Brenda, hi. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom. Sarah, you're usually here in person. I hope everything's okay.
I have a
You have a-
cold.
Oh, got it. Oh.
Yasher koach for those who do not spread and share what they have.
Ha! Exactly. That's right. Okay. I'm just opening Zoom on my computer. 1 second. Hi, Wendy. All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's Shabbat Zachor. It's also International Women's Day. Hello, Jay in Toronto. Let me just close this.
I got it.
You got it? Good morning, Shimon. We're starting a class now. Okay, so people are coming in. Boker Tov. Hi, Sue-Ann. Good morning, Robin Aronson, who just moved to Philadelphia. Hi, Amy in Florida. Good morning. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, Robin, in her new home in Philadelphia.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Hi, Ronnie.
Hi, Ronnie.
Hi, how
Calling
you
in
doing
from
down there?
Riverdale.
So good.
Great.
Hi, Abigail. Okay, we're going to do the bracha over Torah study. Great to see a robust group on Zoom, because not yet in the room, but hopefully that will happen too. All right, everybody in cacophony. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah. Amen, amen. Blessed are you, source of the universe, who has sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to soak in your divine wisdom. Okay, some of this will be a deeper dive into my sermon from last night. So if you heard my sermon, hopefully it won't be too duplicative, but expansive. It's Shabbat Sachor, right? And we are reckoning with the memory of Amalek. And the competing sort of instructions and imperatives to remember and erase the memory, and that confusing paradox. So I want to start today with Shabbat Zachor, that like brief passage from Deuteronomy, and consider some of the meanings of Amalek, the mythic representation of evil in the Torah. Then I want to look at how the character of Esther specifically responds to evil in the book of Esther. And hopefully we'll dive into some stuff you haven't learned yet, and some stuff I've actually realized lately, so I haven't taught it yet. Good morning, Shabbat Shalom, Paul, Alan, Sharon, welcome, Wendy. And my question for today is a big one. It's, how do each of us respond to evil? Whether it's personally in our own lives, globally, nationally, And what does evil mean to us? So that's the question I want us to sit with and live with through this session, and we'll see what comes up. Okay, here I go. I'm going to hopefully share my screen. Amazing when that happens without glitches.
Mhm.
Let's see if that's true for today. Okay, here we go. So it's called Reckoning with Evil, the Emergence of Esther. And first, some backdrop. Let me just see if I can enlarge this. It's not enlarging. Okay. Just 1 second as So you know what, Caroline, I'm going to ask you to share this instead of me because I can't figure out how to make this bigger. And if I can't make it bigger, I can't read it. And neither can many of you, I'm gathering. Excellent. Thank you so much. And if you could make it a little bit bigger, that would be great. Perfect. Okay, here we go. We're starting with Amalek in Deuteronomy, which is part of today's Torah reading, not the Parsha, but the special reading for today, for Shabbat Zachor. And it starts, Zachor et asher asa lecha Amalek. Remember what Amalek did to you on your journey. B'derech b'tzeitchem miMitzrayim, after you left Egypt. So Amalek comes on the scene very early. The Israelites walk through the Red Sea in Exodus chapter 15, and by chapter 16, there's Amalek attacking Israel, attacking the Israelites wandering through the desert. And they've just left Egypt, right? They're especially vulnerable. Like these just freed slaves that are terrified of being in the wilderness and terrified of God and don't really know how they're going to survive, right? They're complaining about water, they're complaining about how they're going to be fed, and they're full of anxiety. So verse 18, Asher korcha baderech v'zanev b'cha kol hanecheshalim acharecha v'ata ayef v'yagea v'lo yarei Elohim. How undeterred by fear of God, he is a nation, it's not just he, surprised you on the march when you were famished and weary, and cut down all the stragglers in your rear. So Amalek is the nation that strikes down the most vulnerable amongst you. And I remember long ago when I was learning about Amalek, and I looked up like the behavior of lions. Like we think about lions as so courageous, but what lions actually do is strike against the vulnerable. Like they hit the weak. And that's what we do when we act not in our full humanity, right? Act like bullies. והיה בהניח אדוני אלוהיך לך מכל אויביך מסביב בארץ, אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך נחלה לרשתה, תמחה את זכר עמלק מתחת השמיים לא תשכח. Therefore, when the Lord your God grants you safety from all your enemies around you, or rest or respite, in the land that the Lord your God has given you as a hereditary portion, you shall blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. Do not forget. So this is really interesting. When do we blot out the memory? When there's a sense of safety in our own land, right? And if you think, for those of you who have experienced trauma, and I don't know what human being hasn't, when can you really reckon with the trauma? After you've sort of achieved some measure of safety in your life. Right? That's when you can kind of look at what happened and sort of let the feelings in your body emerge. Okay. Caroline, can you go down? I'm going to do this one sort of piece, and then I'll take some quick lightning round of comments and questions. Okay, so here's where Amalek, I said Exodus 16, I meant Exodus 17, is first mentioned. I'm not taking any questions or comments yet, I'm sorry. Hold on, we're gonna get through one piece of it, and then we're gonna take a lightning round, and I mean lightning, because I want to get to my topic, which is not only evil, but what happens to the character of Esther. I know, Gloria, thank you for having patience. Okay. Exodus. So it says here, and this is, again, the first time that Amalek attacks Israel, and this is a little snippet from there, and we might see a little snippet later on. ויאמר אדוני אל משה, כתוב זאת זיכרון בספר ושים באוזני יהושע, כי מחו אמחה את זכר עמלק מתחת השמיים. So Adonai said to Moses, inscribe this in a document as a reminder, and read it aloud to Joshua, I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under it. So who's now doing the erasing? Right? It's God. Later, God commands the Israelites to do the erasing, but here it's God will do the erasing. They are then, and also it's like the twin imperatives, right, of memory and erasure. So then Moshe Mizbeach, and Moses built an altar. Vayikashemo Adonai Nisi, and named it Adonai Nisi, or Adonai is my banner, flag. Vayomer, and he said, Yad al kes ya milchama l'Adonai. Hand upon the throne of Adonai. Adonai will be at war with Amalek throughout the ages. Midor l'dor. So there's something about Amalek that's forever, right? In every generation, God is going to be at war with Amalek. But also notice this, that God is referred here as Yah. But that is not the name of God in the 5 books of Moses. This is the only occurrence of God by that name here. It's common in Psalms. I see Alan's like, I'm not sure. Trying to think about like where Yah occurs. Yah occurs all over the place in Psalms, but not in the 5 books. And also notice, thank you so much, that case, the word for kisei or throne, right, is missing an aleph. So both the throne and the name of God are truncated. And what the commentators tell us, what the rabbis tell us, is that as long as Amalek exists in the world, God is somehow, and God's throne is somehow, and God's name is somehow fragmented. That there's something about evil itself that diminishes the divine. Okay, that's a big concept. So I want you to hold that also as we go forward, because we're going to get into a really good story in a minute. And those of you who study with me know that story is really my absolute favorite thing to study, story narrative. Okay, if you can go down a little bit. So I chose a selection from a book that was published in the late 90s called Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman. And it's interesting to me what she says about how we construct narrative around atrocities, because it reminds me of how Amalek is portrayed in these two. Good morning, Rabbi David Ingber. So good to have you.
So good to be here.
How Amalek is portrayed in these two texts. So if someone could read this. Sharon, you feel like it? Feel like reading?
Sure.
Okay, number 3, trauma and recovery.
Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman. The conflict between the will to deny horrible events
Right, so the erasure.
and the will to proclaim them aloud is the central dialectic of psychological trauma. People who have survived atrocities often tell their stories in a highly emotional, contradictory, and fragmented manner that undermines their credibility and thereby serves the twin imperatives of truth-telling and secrecy. When the truth is finally recognized, survivors can be and begin their recovery.
So when they have, as the Torah says it, safety all around in their own land. Go on.
But far too often secrecy prevails, and the story of the traumatic event surfaces not as a verbal narrative, but as a symptom.
Perfect. Thank you so
Wow.
much. Okay, let's stop our sharing, Caroline, if you don't mind. And remember, before I said lightning, I know there's a lot to digest here. And most of it, I want you to carry into the next part most of what's happening inside you, I want you to carry into the next part of what we're studying in terms of the narrative of Vashti and mostly Esther. But right now, I really want a lightning round of comments. So you could either do that through putting in the chat, or you can raise your hand. And forgive me for my rudeness, but I'm going to cut you off. So long comments. Okay, Ronnie Sharfman.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I just wanted to say I'm always struck by this exhortation, which seems to me so fundamental to us now as Jews, which is remember to forget. This paradox, which is like a double-edged sword. Remember to forget. That's what we have to do.
And depending on the moment, we either remember or forget, right? So one of my teachers from JTS, David Roskies, as soon as October 7th happened, he started writing about how imagery of the Holocaust, right, emerged in our construction of the narrative around October 7th. And if anyone's interested in that article, I can send it to them. So yeah, when do we remember, when do we forget? When do we do both? And it is a paradox, and there's always a balance between the two. I think they're always both happening inside us. So thank you, Ronnie. Okay. Gloria, did you want to say something very quick? You had your hand up before.
Yes, sorry, I had to unmute. Is it not an exhortation to let go?
That's
Erase,
interesting.
don't forget to
That's
erase
interesting.
it. Sort
That's
of
interesting.
let go.
I think it's more paradoxical than that. I think it's as Ronnie was saying, right? It's the remembering and the erasure. And which one are we emphasizing at any one given moment? I'm just going to remind people to shut off their phones. Tony, I see your hand, and I just remind people that I'm taking a lightning round right now. But hold on, I'm going to get to you. Oh, good. Hold on, I'm still on the Zoom screen. Okay, Jay, Jill, and then moving to the room, and then going on with the text. Go ahead.
What you just said about the Holocaust and narrative and secrecy, et cetera, reminded me as a grad student at Wisconsin in the mid 70s. I went to a presentation about the Holocaust, and remember, there was not a lot of stuff on the Holocaust for many, many years. And the person made the point, what is the one narrative that we have about the Holocaust up till now, the most famous one? The Diary of Anne Frank. That was really the first and for many years the only. And what was it? It was about hiding in an attic. It was about secrecy. So I think there is something also about trauma and narrative and secrecy. And when you have that feeling of safety, or when you have the ability, enough distance or whatever, to start getting away from the secret.
Beautiful. So when do we have capacity to actually hear the story? And it also reminds me of October 7th and also the devastation in Gaza. And when do we have capacity to take that in as a human being? I'm just going to read Tomas's comment. Without genuine remembering, there can be no genuine forgetting, no letting go. And this is a response to Gloria, I think, a beautiful response. No letting go unless preceded by letting in. Right. It's going to keep presenting itself either in our bodies, in our lives, in our relationships, until we fully remember and actually can tell a story, right? Which brings us to Pesach, which we're not there yet. Okay, Jill, quick, and then Tony, and then Rabbi David, and then we're going on.
Shalom, everyone. So yeah, remembering to forget. The way that I see it is when there's devastation, evil, all those kinds of things, you notice it, you do something about it in very targeted ways, and then you forget. Then like you forget because you need to become energized to remember to be happy, to remember to live your life, to remember to heal people who are, to be healed, to be.
Beautiful. Jill, beautiful. I'm going to cut you off and move on. As I said, lightning round. I just want to repeat one thing that you said. It's like, I guess I'm wondering, are we ever fully healed? Is it linear? Or do we heal enough to live our lives and then at certain points, maybe because global events are re-traumatizing or triggering again, right? It comes up again, right? If it's deep trauma, I don't know that we ever fully let go. Or, I was learning recently about
Yes.
animals and dogs. Dogs are imprinted by a trauma, so they let it go until they're in the same situation. Like my dog, we adopted her from Texas, and she came in a truck for 3 days, and every time we go in a vehicle, she's just, her whole body shakes. And she's fine otherwise, more or less. Yeah, a little aggressive. She's fine otherwise, but put her in a vehicle and she's like, that imprint comes up. So I don't think it's linear. I feel like there's a fantasy in American society of like healing. And I don't think it's so total. Okay, Tony, grab a gift.
That way, I meant it more like kind of toggling between the two, kind of going, going to kind of get some strength to do something about and remember to live, without it, but as best as you can, to be inspired, to be artistic, to be creative, and then
Beautiful, Jill. I'm going to move on. Beautiful. And I love the word you just introduced, toggling between the two. Gorgeous. Okay, Tony, Rabbi David.
So from a Zen perspective, the question would be, who toggles? Who is there to toggle? That's one thing. Second thing would be...
Wait. From a Zen perspective...
Some topic sentences, and then the royal we can pursue it, but go ahead. Did you want to respond? There's no one, the more in Zen or in Buddhist practice, you recognize there's no separate self.
I see what you're saying. Who's toggling? Who's the persona that's toggling? And what's the greater
and so
whole?
One answer to it is Havez's Forgive the Dream in the book, The Gift, where Forgive the Dream, that the only reason that you're still listening to an old alley song of pain is because God and love haven't grown big enough.
Oof. Okay, Tony, great. So let me just repeat what you said. The only reason you're still listening to an old alley song of pain is because
you have not yet learned to forgive the dream, because God and love have not grown big enough.
All right, let's let that land. Amazing, thank you. Rabbi David Inder.
And one last.
Okay, now, lightning rounds. I'm sticking with it.
I think that for me, the most touching piece of this, the hermit piece that you brought, which is so powerful, is that the fragmented manner of remembrance is contradictory and it undermines credibility. And that there are twin imperatives, which is like such a phenomenal phrase. A twin imperative of truth-telling and secrecy, of course, that's the classic double bind. You want to tell the truth, but you also are sworn to secrecy. And that's, of course, reflected beautifully in what you're pointing out in like are we to forget it? Are we toggling? And I think that therein lies the rub and the danger of overly spiritualizing trauma. That I have a lot to say to what Tony said, but like I think that part of what trauma victims experience is exactly the loss of self, which spiritual language often apes. And if you're not careful, you can use the kind of loss of self as a spiritual value to undermine the truth-telling, which is the psychological imperative. And I think that's like, you got that. That's such a...
Okay, can I just say that if we only had your two statements, Tony and Rabbi David, like, wow, we're done. So, and I also, that's amazing. So I also want to say that I think that as spiritual as we are, just to echo what you're saying, it lives in our bodies and it's going to insist on being known until it's fully known.
It's Thomas,
Like there's no
Thomas
way.
said, let in to let go. You can't let go.
There's no way it's going to reenact, at least that's it's going to reenact and reenact and reenact until you really fully can tell the story. And I think the other thing about the difficulty of telling the story is not only that you're sworn to secrecy because the abuser or the perpetrator and whatever it was doesn't want you to tell, but you don't want to fully know it. It's too painful. And it's painful to be known. Okay. Okay. Then as we go back to the screen, the screen sharing, Caroline, we're going to take your last comment and then we're going to go on. Yes, quick. Sorry.
Yeah, just super quick. I have a question, which is,
can people on Zoom hear Ben? Can
you move a little bit closer to the mic, please? Thank you.
Sorry, thank you so much, Ben.
Good morning. Shabbat shalom. My question is, I mean, kind of a naive one, which is, what is the Torah when it's telling us to blot this out? How is that supposed to help us? And similarly, when the Torah is asking us to remember, how also, I think that's more clear to me, how that's supposed to help us. But how is blotting out this memory of Amalek attacking the most vulnerable supposed to help us?
So I want to go, I think there are a million answers to this. Thank you for asking it. I want to go to Jill's point. So I think if we're only living in the trauma, then we can't live. We just can't live. So there has to be some measure of blotting out. And the remembering, I don't know why, but this is making me a little emotional. It's because like you don't want it to happen again. You can't let it happen again. And yet, midor lador, like it happens again and again. So that's my response to you at this moment. I think there's probably a bigger answer that I'll reflect on. Okay, story, everybody, ready? All that big heaviness, but let's go. So already in chapter 1 of the book of Esther, so let me just give you a little intro. We're now diving into the book of Esther as an illustration of what it means to remember and forget Amalek, right? And who's the representative of Amalek? I'm just so happy to see you, Barry, off the screen. It's so great to have you. I've only known Barry on screen until yesterday, until last night. So who's the representative of Amalek in the book of Esther? And that's Haman, right? He's a descendant of Amalek and the king of Agag. Which also relates to our Torah reading today, but that's all information that I don't think we need to get into right now. My chiddush right now, what I realized reading this book again for the purposes of preparing for today, is I realized that there's evil in this book before Haman even comes on the scene. That it's not only about the threat of destroying the Jews, it's how women are treated in the past. And it's interesting that the saving of the Jews comes through the empowerment of a woman and her revealing of her concealed identity. Okay, so let's get into the story. We're now in chapter 1, and chapter 1 begins with Achashverosh and a sort of a lavish, empire and banquets and drunkenness, and it's all about abundance and not having any limits. There are no limits to the drinking, it says specifically. And then what does Vashti do? So what Vashti does is King Ahasuerus asks her to come to his banquet of men to show off with her crown. And she says no. And she says no because I don't have a line here, but she doesn't want to show off her beauty. And it seems like either she's resisting his power or she doesn't want to be debased in that kind of environment, right? The Midrash tells us that she was asked to come naked only with her crown. But whatever it is, there's some kind of diminishment of her. And she says flat out no, she refuses, right? So, and then, right, her refusal will lead us to Esther in a minute. Okay, so I want to see here in chapter 1 how that refusal is processed by the king and his supporters. I think we're going to just read this one in English because it's really background. And I'm going to ask someone in the room to read.
I like to read.
You like to read?
I like to read.
Okay, you go
Where do I
read.
go? What?
Number 4.
Right there, right?
Yeah, right there.
What, he asked, shall be done according to law? Queen Vashti failing to obey the command of King Ahasuerus, conveyed by the eunuchs. Thereupon, Memucan declared in the presence of the king and the ministers, Queen Vashti has committed an offense not only against your majesty, but also against all the officials and against all the peoples in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will make all wives despise their husbands, and reflect that King Ahasuerus himself ordered Queen Vashti to be brought before him, but she would not come. This very day, the ladies of Persia and Media, who have heard of the queen's behavior, will cite it to all your majesty's officials, and there will be no end of scorn and provocation.
So what Vashti did will be a model to all women, right, and how they behave towards their husbands and towards men in the entire kingdom, right? Right. This model of scorn is so powerful that it's going to travel all over the land.
If it please your majesty, let a royal edict be issued by you, and let it be written into the laws of Persia and Media, so that it cannot be.
If you can go, Caroline, if you can go down a little bit.
Okay.
No, you're good.
Cannot be abrogated, that Vashti shall never enter the presence of King Ahasuerus, and let your majesty bestow her royal state upon another who is more worthy than she. Then will the judgment executed by your majesty resound throughout your realm, vast though it is, and all wives will treat their husbands with respect, high and low alike. The proposal was approved by the king and the ministers, and the king did as Memucan proposed. Dispatches were sent to all the provinces of the king, so every province in its own script, and to every nation
Go down, Caroline, please.
in its own language, that every man shall wield authority in his home and speak the language of his own people.
Like every man will be a prince for authority in his own home. So one can only imagine how much fear this refusal by Vashti, right, sort of brought up in all these men. And, you know, I don't want to talk about this book as if it's history. It's not history, it's literature. But I think this fear is sort of presumed as background. Okay, so that's the background into which Esther walks, right? Like, you know what, if you ever notice, you know, someone marries like one person and they marry another person, and how the second wife or husband seems like a counterpoint to the first. So Esther is the exact counterpoint to Vashti, right?
Certainly.
Well, we'll see, right? We'll see. So at least at first. So Vashti says no, and basically Esther doesn't speak. And as we'll see, Esther is completely, in the beginning, passive. And is brought here and brought there, and most of the verbs, if not all, used for her are passive verbs. So let's dive into that. Asher Chaim, do you feel like reading Esther 2? Number 5.
אחר הדברים האלה, כשוך חמת המלך אחשוורוש, זכר את ושתי, ואת אשר עשתה, ואת אשר נגזר עליה. After these things, when the King Ahasuerus' rage had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decreed against her. ויאמרו נערי המלך משרתיו, the king's young advisors told him, יבקשו למלך נערות בתולות טובות מראה. Let them seek out for the king naro, young virgin women, good of appearance. V'yafked hamelech pikidim bechol medinot malchuto. Let the king appoint appointees in all of the regions of his realm. V'yikbetzu et kol na'ara betula tovat mar'eh el Shushan habira el Beit Hanashim. And they will gather every virgin young woman, good looking, to Shushan, the capital, to the place where women are stored. El Yad Hege, Sri Samelech Shomer Hanashim, under the supervision of Hege, the royal eunuch who guards the women, V'naton Tamrukehen, so that their cosmetics may be provided. V'hana'ara asher titav be'enei hamelech timloch tachat Vashti. And the young woman who finds favor in the eyes of the king will reign in place of Vashti. Vaytav hadavar be'enei hamelech vayas kain. Sounded good in the eyes of the king, and so he did it. Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan habira. There was a Jewish...
Stop there for 1 second, Asher Chaim. Caroline, if you can go down a little bit, I just want to point out one piece of commentary. Go down. Go down. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, right there. Right there. So this is from Rabbi Jericho Vincent in her translation of her new translation of the Megillah, and this sort of articulated how I started seeing what this was at the beginning of the book of Esther. And she writes, or they write, I'm not sure. Perhaps for a few women, this might have been a great adventure, a chance to try and win the heart of the most powerful bachelor of the empire. But for most women, this was not an adventure. It was a horrifying mass tragedy, ripped from their homes. It sounds like they were picked up from the street, right? It says Esther was taken to the palace, and their loved ones. Women were brought against their will to Shushan to be assaulted by the king, and then jailed in the palace for the rest of their lives. For once they had been with the king, they could not be permitted to go home. So that's kind of sobering, and that's what I meant before about sort of the evil before the evil in this book. It's not presented as the evil, but I read it as the first evil that is being endured. And an evil to which I think Esther cannot but respond to with passivity as a kind of survival strategy, given what happened to Vashti. Right? You could just imagine, right? All the women are, you know what happened to that queen before us, right? And what she did, right? So she was the instruction to which they're now responding so they can survive. And we'll see later that Esther says specifically, no one could come to see the king unsummoned, right? Initiation, assertiveness itself is punished by death. Okay, I'm going on. I'll call on you later.
Very quick.
Very quick? Okay. For you?
I'm wondering whether the Torah very often has contradictory statements in it intentionally for us to make up our minds about that we have a version, especially at this time. Because later, when there is a problem about if the woman drinks this and something goes wrong, then we know she's guilty. So we now have the opportunity of saying, but wait, it showed us that we can go ahead and be contradictory, that's intentional.
I think the Torah is full of contradictions. I think you're absolutely right. And it leaves us in the position of being interpreters.
Right.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, let's go back up to where we were. Caroline and Asher Chaim, you could pick it up again.
Yeah, if I may, the king is foolishly just looking for something that looks good on his elbow as opposed to a queen who can help him reign. Just
Wait,
saying.
I'm sorry, say that one One more time, I didn't hear it. Say it one more time.
The only criterion seems to be good looking, as opposed to speaks 7 languages, can help bring
Yes,
the kingdom
exactly.
together, et cetera, et cetera.
It's even worse than Miss America. Exactly, the beauty pageant. At least they're supposed to have some talents, right? Yeah.
Well, priorities, right?
Priorities, yes, this is the priority.
I mean, Ahasuerus is remarkably passive also as a character. Like, there's almost nothing that he does agentically. Everybody's telling him to do
Everyone's,
things. So,
his advisors are always telling
right,
him what to do.
nothing he does is initiated by himself. It's just
Right, which is scary because he wields so much power and yet he's passive. It's not a good combination,
not a
right?
good combination.
Although Haman had a lot of agency, and we don't like that either.
But the good thing about Ahasuerus is that he's impressionable by people around him. As long as you get the right person in there to impress upon him, that's his. We're familiar with that one. So.
Right, exactly. As Elon Musk, right, falls out of favor. Okay, let's go on.
If I may push back against my teachers, it also gives Ahasuerus plausible deniability.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Ish Yehudi haya b'Shushan habira. There was a Judean man in Shushan, the capital, Ushmo Mordechai ben Yair ben Shimei ben Kish ish Yemini. His name was Mordechai, son of Yair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjaminite. Asher hoglam Yerushalayim, im hagola asher hoglita, im Yechonia melech Yehuda. He had been exiled from Jerusalem with the deportation that was deported with Yechonia, king of Judah. Asher hegla Nebuchadnezzar melech Bavel, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babel, had exiled. Vayhi omein et Hadassah. He was tutoring Hadassah. He Esther bat dodo. That's Esther, his cousin. Ki ein la va'em. She had no mother or father or mother. V'na'ara yifat torvi tovat mar'eh. And the young girl was very good looking, pretty. Uvmot avia v'imah le'acha Mordechai lo levat. And when her father and mother died, Mordechai took her to be his daughter. Vahi b'shama dvar hamelech v'dato, v'gbeitz na'arot rabot el Shushan habira el yad Hegai. And when the word of the king and edict were heard, and when were gathered many young women to Shushan, the capital, under the hand of Hegai, Vatilakach Esther el Beit HaMelech. Esther was taken to the house of the king. El Yad Hegai.
So note the passive verb, Vatilakach.
Into the hand of Hegai, the guardian of the women. Vatitav hana'ara be'einav, vatisa hesed lifanav. The young girl was good in his eyes, and she elicited grace in his presence. Vayvahel et samurchea ve'et manotea latet lah, ve'et sheva haruyot latet lah mi beit hamelech. And he hastened her cosmetic treatments and portions to give her, and 7 young women who were appropriate to serve under her from the house of the king. Vaishaneha ve'et na'arotea letov beit hanashim. And he instructed her and her serving girls to the goodness of the harem. Lo higida Esther et amah v'et moladetah. Esther did not reveal her nation or her genealogy. Ki Mordechai siva aleha asher lo tagid, because Mordechai had commanded her that she not speak.
So Esther is taken here and taken there, and she's very beautiful, and everyone seems to fall in love with her, including Haggai, who's the sort of the head of the women's harem. And she's also told not to speak, or at least not to reveal her identity. Okay, Caroline, if you can go down a little bit, I want to point out some, yes. So
she's not just pretty, she also evokes grace.
Yes, but we don't know what she does to do that.
But it's character. It's character. It's not just a pretty face.
Perhaps, I'm not sure.
She's got it.
She's got something. She's got something. She's got something. Yes. Perhaps it's poised. Perhaps it's grace. It's hard to know, but people do respond to her. So I think you're right, Asha Chaim. I imagine it's more than simple beauty. Okay, let's look at Esther Rabbah, number 8. So this is really interesting. They're commenting on Esther finding favor in the eyes of everyone who saw her. Noset chen be'enei kol ro'eha. Rabbi Yehuda Omer ke'ikonin hazeh. So Rabbi Yehuda says she was like an icon or like a statue. Is a Greek word, and I think the best translation is statue, unless someone else has something else to suggest. Yeah, statue. So she'elet b'nei adam mabitin ba v'hi arava al kulam. That 1,000 people look at, and she appears beautiful to all of them. So there's something about her that everyone reacts to. But now go down. I want to look at one more about related. Keep going. Esther the chameleon. Okay, number 11. But Tehi Esther noset chen. Amar Rabbi Elazar milamed shelachol echad va'echad nidmita lo ke'umato. So Rabbi Elazar says that Esther finding favor in the sight of all those who looked upon her, everyone thought that she was part of their nation. In other words, everyone saw exactly what they wanted, right? So, and this for me kind of tracks well with Mordecai saying to her, don't reveal who you are. Because she could be anybody for anybody, anything for anybody.
I just want to make sure I understand. Are you saying, which of these two are you saying? That everybody saw in her what they wanted?
Yes.
Or that she herself could become whatever they wanted her to be as a chameleon? Which, it sounds
Maybe
like
both.
you said, both.
Maybe both.
No, I really love the last one more than the first one because then the onus was on her as a chameleon to track what she needed to be in order to survive, as opposed to like being a blank slate that everybody projected onto, which feel,
Yeah. So she had that, and maybe that's the talent that she has, right? That she could be whoever anyone needed her to be. You know, it's funny because if someone says to me, "Oh, everybody likes you," I don't actually necessarily take that as a compliment. Because it makes me wonder, do people really know me? Not because I'm so bad, but because like everybody else, I'm complicated, right? It's like, is that really what we want on this earth, for everybody to like us?
And it also tracks with like, if that's a response to trauma, then trauma can actually induce in us a kind of sociopathy. Like when we talk about people who are sociopathic, they read a room so well that they can become whatever you want them to be. They're empty.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like weird, and I'm not blaming her, God forbid. But just
God forbid.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. I mean, this is her survival strategy.
Exactly.
And is it pathological? I don't think it's pathological. It's actually appropriate to the setting. Survival. Right? And this goes back to Deuteronomy saying, and when you will have safety all around, then you can erase the memory. She doesn't have safety all around. Mm-hmm. Right? This is the perfect response. Okay, I'm gonna go on to the heart of the matter. And before I do, I'm gonna take, did you have your hand up or are you just going like this? Okay. Okay, 2 very quick comments, Jay and Beth.
Very quick, just to be fair. Oh, you know, we keep saying Mordechai told and Mordechai said, but no, Mordechai tziva, Mordechai commanded.
Yes.
So I just want to say that where she comes from is also passivity. It may not only be in the court. It may have been just the general role of women throughout.
Okay, thank you. I think that's definitely a fair point. Okay.
Shabbat shalom. I think it's possible that Esther's talent may have been her near perfect empathy for others, and that's why everyone loved her and saw what they wanted to see in her, because she was able to reflect back their own projections to them in a way that they found very pleasing. DeBarty.
I like that. That's a kind of, you know, imbuing her with empathy, which is more than a trauma response. And maybe it's the two together, you know.
Maybe it's also maybe the plot device where she's an orphan is not just to tell us how Mordecai came to be her, one who could command her, but also that that's part of her character development, that she knows what it is to lose her parents. And then somehow that's connected to Beth's, or preternatural, like what you're saying, that she has this capacity.
Right, so not only is she dealing with a traumatic surrounding, but she comes from trauma. She's in exile, right? She's well, it's hard to say exactly when the book is set, but post-destruction of the first temple, where they've lost a world. So this is not only trauma, but it's post-trauma. So it's trauma upon trauma upon trauma. You know, it reminds me, this broke my heart not more than anything else, but it's really broke my heart to read of the Holocaust survivor in Israel whose grandson was killed on October 7th. I couldn't, I mean, the bookends for that man's life, right? The heart, and how do you blot out the memory when you can't blot out the memory, it resurfaces. Okay, now I want to take Jay's point, which is the perfect segue into chapter 4, and think about who's commanding who when. Okay, so we're skipping a bunch of juicy stuff, but you can go back to it. I really want to this is the heart of the matter, this chapter. Because in this chapter is the Nahafochu. In this chapter is the flip, right? And she is the only character that really changes in the entire book, I would suggest. I mean, Achashverosh changes his mind, but he doesn't change as a character. Okay, so I'm going to start reading. Mordechai Yada. Okay, so this is, again, what just happened is Haman came to Achashverosh and convinced him to destroy all the Jews who are this people set apart with their own language and they're different. And Haman gave money to the treasury, and Achashverosh agreed to do this, right? And an edict was published about this, and that's where chapter 4 begins. Mordechai yada et kol asher na'asa, v'yikra Mordechai begadav v'yibash sak be'efer. Mordechai learned that all had happened. Mordechai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes. V'yitzei b'toch ha'ir v'yiz'ak za'aka gedola u'mara. He went through the city crying out loudly and bitterly, just midrashically and literally for a moment. What's interesting is that that's an echo of Esav's cry when he discovers that he doesn't get the blessing. Right? It's almost a repeat of that phrase. Until he came in front of the palace gate. But one could not enter the palace gate wearing sackcloth, which is really interesting because it means that you can't grieve in the palace. There's no grief. Right? That emotion outlawed.
Like in the Buddhist tale, where his father, the king, says, no sign of anything that can cause sorrow.
Wow, that's a great connection.
Hey, could you reiterate what he just said, because it was a bit quiet? Sorry.
Like in the Buddhist tale, where the Buddha's father said no grief.
The astrologer predicts his son will either be a great sage.
Can you come closer to the speakers? I don't have to.
That's okay. The astrologer predicts that the future Buddha will either be a great sage or a great king, and the king, his father, tries to make sure he never becomes a great sage by banning all of the 3 holy sites, illness, death, and old age, from the kingdom, thereby guareteeing that he'll become a great king, not a great sage.
Really interesting. So Esther's journey here really is facilitated by the knowledge and the acknowledgement of grief. And maybe this is the Zachor, right? the understanding, the bringing to consciousness. Okay. ובכל מדינה, מקום אשר דבר המלך בדעתו מגיע עדל גדול יהודים. In every province that the king's command and decree reached, there was great mourning, great grief. Right? La Yudim for the Jews, B'tzom and fasting, B'chi and weeping, U'misped and wailing, Sak be'ether, sackcloth and ashes, Sak l'radim. And everybody lay in sackcloth and ashes. I'm not sure exactly what Sak means. Vatavona na'arot Esther v'sariseha v'yagidu la. And the Esther's maidens and her eunuchs came and told her. Now look at this verb, because this is really a drama that's expressed in verb forms. Vatitchalchal hamalka. And the queen was greatly agitated, or she started, right? She, how like someone startled, but it's a reflexive verb. And for me, what that signifies is it's the beginning of some inwardness on her part. Like until now, she did everything that people told her to do. Haggai, Mordechai, or not to, right? Here, there's something happening within her. But right? So you can imagine how agitated, how scared she is. Because this doesn't belong in the narrative, right? This is a disruption of the status quo. Like she's supposed to be quiet, she's not supposed to know or say or respond agentically. So she sent clothes to like cover him up, right? To cover Mordechai. Right? That's her first response. It's like, like when something happens, you don't want to know it. It's like, oh, okay, let's pretend it's not happening. Let's go on as if it's not happening. But it's happening. So that he could take off his sackcloth, and he refuses. This is the second refusal in the book, and let's see what the refusal does. Next section of text, number 13. Vatikra Esther lahatach misariseha hamelech asher hamid lefaneh vatitzaveu al Mordechai. Thereupon Esther summoned Hatach, one of the eunuchs whom the king had appointed to serve her, and sent him to Mordechai, but really commanded Mordechai. So this is the beginning of the reversal. She's doing the commanding. She's assuming her authority. Lada'at, to know. Mazeh v'al mizeh. What is this? And what is this about? Right? So finally some curiosity from Esther. Right? You could feel the birth here of something new within her. Hatach went out to Mordechai in the city square in front of the palace gate. Mordechai told him all that had happened to him. About the money that Haman had offered to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. Al ganzei hamelech v'yudim le'obdam ve'et hatsheken kitav hadat asher nitan b'shushan u'hashmidam natanu leharot et Esther lahagid la. He also gave them the written text of the law that had been proclaimed in Shushan for their destruction. Utzavot aleha lavo el hamelech. Now Mordechai is doing the commanding her to go to the king. To ask him for mercy, and to plead with him for her people. Yeah.
I just want back to the passivity of Esther. It seems that Esther would have otherwise not considered her identity had Mordechai not told her to do so. That seems from the text. He commanded her not to speak her identity, and so she complied. And then here, her agency also begins with Mordechai's own unwillingness to continue to hide because something has crossed the line, and now Mordecai is the beginning of that self-revelation. She takes her agency though, but she takes her cue from him because he refuses to get dressed up again. Like she got dressed and hid, and he will refuse to dress up and hide.
And he's acting in solidarity with the rest of the Jews
Exactly.
who are all in sackcloth and ashes.
Right. And so she's now right.
Right.
So I just love that. She also doesn't know. I love that you said this as Esther wants to know, because in many ways she doesn't know. Her desire to know what he knows is this journey towards her own. Right. I love that.
And it's also a journey to partnership because she's commanding him, he's commanding her, right? Like something new is really happening here. Yeah. Okay. All right. Mordecai calls Esther into accountability. Number 14. Vayavo Hatach ve'aged le'Esther et divrei Mordecai. Hatach came and told Esther what Mordecai said. But Tomer Esther lahatach, titzadvehu al Mordecai. And Esther told Hatach to take back to Mordecai the following reply. But again, going back to Jay's point, it's in the language of command, right? She is commanding him. She says, Kol avdei hamelach v'im medinot hamelach yodim asher kol ish v'isha asher yavo el hamelach el hatzer pnimit asher lo yikareh achat dato lahamit levad me asher yoshitz lo hamelach et sharvit hazahav v'chayah v'ani lo nikriti lavo el hamelach desh l'shem yom. All the king's courtiers and all the people of the king's provinces know that if any person, man or woman, enters the king's presence in the inner court without having been summoned, there is but one law for him, that he be put to death. Only if the king extends the golden scepter to him may he live. And I have not been summoned to visit the king for the last 30 days. So it's absolutely terrifying. It's a matter of life and death, right? So again, initiation, agency with the king is supremely dangerous. Verse 12. Vayigidu Mordechai et divrei Esther. So Mordechai was told what Esther said. Vayomer Mordechai lahashiv el Esther. And Mordechai says, this is what you should respond to Esther. This is one of my favorite lines in all of biblical literature. Al tadani b'nafshech v'himalet beit hanel. Don't think that you can hide in the palace of all the Jews. We call it Yudim. Ki'im hacharesh tacharishi ba'et hazot. Because if you are silent at this moment, revach v'hatzalat ya'amol Yudim mimakom acher. Salvation will come to the Jews from another place. Ba'at, and you, uvet avich kavedu, and you and your family's house will perish. Umi yodea, and who knows? Im le'et kazot got malchut. Who knows if for just this very moment you came into royalty or power? Like, what are you going to do with your power, Esther? Why do you have this power? Okay, so that was a lot. So maybe I should stop here for a few minutes. And I will say, for those who didn't hear it, my sermon last night was about what are we going to do with our power and privilege? Like, why have we come into this situation, and what are we going to do with it? Okay, let me just see if there are any comments before we go on. And again, I'm going to take quick comments. And first thank you, Rabbi David, for joining us. Really good to have you here, as always. Okay, I'm going to first take comments from people who haven't spoken, and then I think I'm not going to take comments from people who have spoken. I'm sorry, but I want to do a little more text with you all. Okay, Wendy and Rob, and then Paul. Thank you, Alan, for being Paul's supporter. Okay.
I think for Esther, there was another choice that is not presented, in that she could have come forward like as a righteous Gentile. And
ooh, that's really interesting.
And she could have come forward without revealing her.
She could have advocated for the
heritage.
Jews as if she wasn't Jewish.
Right, and that's not an option that's presented.
Well, let's see. Let's just go forward for a minute. So what happens is she says to the king, I and my people are in peril.
Right.
So why would he have cared about everyone else if she wasn't in the mix.
Because he was so enamored with her. And,
Maybe.
and that
Maybe.
and that if she says,
Maybe.
I want this, I like this, he would have
Uh-huh.
said, okay, sure, fine.
Okay, maybe.
So
Possibly.
it might have been
All right, I'm gonna go on because I think we
advantageous
spoke
for
of the
that to be
possibility.
choice one and choice two to reveal her heritage.
I think the fact that she's concealed and then revealed is essential to the literary artistry of the book. And in fact, the Talmud tells us that the hint for the book of Esther is when God says, Haster, Aster, Epanai, I will hide my face. Because God, right, God, this is one of two books in the Bible that God is not mentioned. Right, so God is hiding God's face, and this is the book about sort of Jewish or human agency in the face of evil. It's not the story of the Exodus. It's totally different than that. Rob.
Yeah, just a comment. In the beginning, should we remember Amalek? Should we forget Amalek? You see the fear that nobody wants to make a move. 5 blocks from where we're sitting right here, there are people.
We're not talking about that. I'm sorry.
I can't
We
mention
can't
that?
do it. No. It's going to take us off track. I'm sorry.
Okay, but it's part of it because I have not heard a response. It's the biggest Jewish city in the world. There's no response. There are people in full regalia.
Okay, so Rob is worried about what's happening, but we're not going to talk about it because I feel like it's going to derail the whole conversation. But what's happening at Columbia and Barnard and the Jewish response to it. So I understand that. I understand.
Everybody's quiet. It's good.
We're going to be quiet here too.
Yeah.
You're gonna dress up.
We'll forget. We'll forget.
No, actually, no. But what I want us to do is accept this as a meta instruction as opposed to talking about specific politics. And the reason I don't want to talk about specific politics is because I know there's a range of views around the room.
I'm sure there is.
Okay, who else had their hand up? Elena? No. Paul?
Esther, the modality of her.
This is my gift.
So Esther's not commanded to make this next move in the story. She's given a rationale. Mordecai is presenting her with a worldview and inviting her to make a decision within that worldview. And so what we're given here.
Well, he's presenting to her more than a worldview, it's a reality.
Well, but
It's an emergency.
It's a question. He's asking her, why are you on this? Why are you in this position?
Yeah.
And inviting her to answer that question in a specific
Beautiful.
way. So now
Beautiful.
she has
Yes.
agency, and that's to me, it's not that she does what she does, is that she is responding to a question and therefore making a decision in
She's
a
being
particular
confronted
way.
with her own destiny.
And she is doing it of her own volition,
Yeah.
given a worldview.
Beautiful. Okay, Richard Barry, and then Richard online, and then I know I can't call on people that have spoken already because there's a couple of things I want to do before we end. And if there's time, Ben, I promise I will call on you. Okay, Barry, and then
Okay, very quickly, here, because I know what it's like on Zoom. I think there's something about revealing herself and making herself vulnerable and putting herself in, claiming that she is a Jew, right? Like in contradiction to your wonderful point, Wendy. It's like when she does that, then she is completely vulnerable. She's owned who she is and she's put herself in that.
yes.
Situation.
She's completely empowered and completely vulnerable at once.
Yeah.
It's that
I think that's
contradiction.
very important.
Yeah,
Just
I
the
think that's
part that I
great,
wanted to
Barry.
just
Thank you so much. Okay, Richard and Barbara, and then I'm going on. I'm going to ask you for quick comments.
Wait, I'm getting
Richard,
an
there's
echo.
a lot of echoes. A lot of echoes.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Is that help?
Yes.
Elizabeth's iPad is off. I have to turn that off.
Okay, I'm going to start with Barbara and then we'll come back to you. Barbara.
Hey, hi, Shabbat Shalom. I always find the Esther story very problematical from the point of view of women and women's power and trauma. And because she derives her power, at least from my interpretation, from how she looks. And so she ends up with power over the king, again, because of her beauty. And she's still being told what to do on some level by Mordecai, who says, well, maybe this is why you're there.
All right, Barbara, I'm going to respond to your point. I'm going to respond. So absolutely, she's in the position that she's in because of her power and her poise and her grace. And
that's not her power. That's not power.
Let me, I misspoke. Sorry. She's in the position that she's in because of her beauty and poise. So her power is that the king is enamored with her and she uses that. Mm-hmm. So either you think.
Right, but this is the patriarchal story that is being reinforced every time we read the book of Esther.
I hear you.
It's a problem for me.
It is a problem. So either we think that whatever it is that our power is, if we use that, then that's our power. In other words, even if my power derives from beauty and being loved by a powerful man, if I'm using,
every woman in the room has probably used it.
Barbara, I'm sorry, I'm moving on. I need to say my statement, and I'm going to read one more passage about this.
Can I try again?
Hold on, Richard. Hold on. 1 second.
Sure.
1 second. Hold on. Okay, look at number 15. Don't even share it. Oh, you can't share it if it's there. Okay. But Tomer Esther Shiv al Mordechai. Esther sent back this answer to Mordechai. Lech knos et kol Yehudim hanimtzaim b'Shushan v'tzumu alai. Go assemble all the Jews who live in Shushan and fast on my behalf. Al tishtu shlosha yamim laila v'yom gam ani b'narutai atzum ken u'v'chen avo el melch asher lo kedat v'kasher avadati. And I and my maidens will observe the same fast. So by fasting, they're actually joining the collective of Jews. They're standing in solidarity with the whole nation. Then I shall go to the king, though it is contrary to the law. And if I am to perish, I will perish. So she is actually putting her life in the line. And Barbara, I don't want to have another conversation about this, but I want to say to you that she's doing something very powerful here, at least in my eyes. So Mordecai went about the city and did